Noah is a 2014 religious action drama directed by Darren Aronofsky and written by both Aronofsky and Ari Handel. It retells the story of Noah's Ark for modern audiences. Naturally, the first thing one might notice of this film version of the narrative of Noah is how it differs from the version told in Sunday school. But there is actually more accuracy than one might think, especially when taking the variety of religious accounts of the flood into consideration, not just the verses from the King James Version or New International Version of the Christian Bible. Before diving into this comparison, a few words of warning. Noah, as a religious figure, is connected to several religions, all with varying interpretations and traditions surrounding him and his stories. Not to mention there are multiple viewpoints of his life within individual religions. Scripture, in general, is a combination of a myriad of texts, translated and reinterpreted over thousands of years, sourced, with some parts made canonical and some left apocryphal. Even the biblical canon, which is called that to respect its word as the absolute truth of its faith, has a variety of viewpoints among scholars and theologians. What is said hereafter is taken from multiple sources and, like almost anything that is spread out over several religions, can be contradicted within other texts. Something that can be called into question due to multiple sources and interpretations is not necessarily canonically wrong, because there is no true consensus among all scholars, all priests, all rabbis, all faiths. Let's begin. Noah, as a religious figure, is an important character in Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Mandaism, and Baha'i. As it pertains to the Judeo-Christian interpretations of Noah, it should be noted that the Genesis narrative is actually comprised of two separate sources that eventually created the canon of the book, those being the Yahwist source and the priestly source. There are variations between them. The film finds a peaceful medium in the discrepancy of the name of God by simply calling him the Creator. Nobody in the film says Yahweh, Elohim, Jehovah, or anything else throughout the course of the film. According to the Bible, the name of God was used during the lives of Adam and Eve, but in the book of Exodus, God commands Moses to tell the people something different. Exodus chapter 3, 13 through 15 states, "Then Moses said to God, If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent to me, and they ask me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, Say this to the people of Israel, The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations." In other words, the film calling God only the Creator and not giving him a proper name actually fits within Judeo-Christian understanding of the name of God.
They forget. Strength comes from the Creator.
There are other theories about how the narrative of Noah as well as the Torah in general was comprised. Some even claim that the flood is merely a copy of the Epic of Gilgamesh. But to sum up, there are likely various sources and therefore notable variations in the stories. With this in mind, the fact that the film Noah does not follow the exact text of the biblical Noah is actually very much part of the tradition of religious texts, meaning there is not always consensus even in the alleged canon of Scripture. Noah himself has some disparity in how he is portrayed in the flood narrative. There are two parts to his story. In the first, Noah is the hero of the flood, and in the second, he is the father of mankind and planted the first vineyard. Some scholars believe that the subject of the latter account was not the same as the subject of the former, and that the original name of the hero of the flood was actually Enoch. The film portrays Noah as Noah, one character, not Enoch. The film shows us giant rock creatures that were actually fallen angels, originally made of light, who were cursed by the Creator to be one with the earth. These creatures, though partially made with some creative license from the two writers of the film, are actually referenced in scriptural texts. Kind of. The Watchers, as they are called, are mentioned in the Book of Enoch, an ancient Jewish religious text that did not make the cut of being biblical canon. In the Book of Enoch, they were cursed by God, but not for wanting to help early man. Instead, they were covetous of women. They were initially meant to be guardians of mankind, as explained in the Book of Enoch, but the hows and whys are different in the film. The Genesis Apocryphon, part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, even mentions that Noah's father is worried that his son was actually fathered by one of the Watchers. This is not discussed in the film. The point is that the Watchers are not brand new characters, only the way they are depicted. Their offspring were giants called the Nephilim, but there is no mention of the fallen angels or offspring being boulder monsters in the Book of Enoch or the Dead Sea Scrolls. Only the film. Noah having 3 sons in ancient texts Shem, Ham, and Japheth, is mirrored in the film. Although, as youths, they are given more characterization. In the film, Ham is jealous of his brother for having a mate, conspires with the enemy, and is generally traitorous. This is not exactly how Ham is written in scripture, but there is an unsavory element to Ham in these texts that led to a curse. But if the film takes liberties with Ham, what did he actually do? There is some evidence in scripture that Ham either mocked his father's nakedness, emasculated his father, had sex with his father's wife, or some combination of the three. Thus, his son, Canaan, the product of such a union, was cursed. In the film, Ham does not have a son, at least not where the film ends. Noah being naked and found by his sons is depicted, but without anything illicit happening. In the film, Noah has an adopted daughter of sorts named Illa. She has a relationship with Shem. In the Book of Jubilees, Shem's wife is said to be named Sadeketalabab, although that may have been changed for the film due to the difficult pronunciation. In the film, Ham's love interest is named Nell, which is also a reference to the Book of Jubilees, which names her Neltamaok. Again, perhaps shortened due to pronunciation. In the book, they marry. In the film, she dies before anything can happen.
Help me, please! Help me! Help me! Help me!
To further complicate these names and characters, in the Quran, Noah has 4 sons, not 3. One disbelieved him, stayed behind, and was drowned. In this book, none of the sons are named. The Book of Peter clearly states that there were 8 people on the ark. In the film, there are, at first, 7, and the identities are different. But by the end, Tubal-Cain dies, bringing us down to 6, and then 2 babies are born, bringing us up to 8. The number is biblically accurate, although the names and characters are different. The fact that others are saved from the flood is not unheard of. In a Gnostic text, the Apocryphon of John, it is said that others heeded Noah's warning and were saved. In the film, Noah carries a piece of snakeskin passed down to him from generation to generation. This is said to be the skin of the snake from the Garden of Eden. In the Bible, when Adam and Eve are expelled from the garden, it says God gave them a garment of skin. One interpretation is that it could have been the snakeskin. Noah's disgust with humanity during the second half of the film, which covers everything from wanting mankind to eventually perish even after the flood, to a desire to murder his own grandchildren, may seem out of tone with what is said of Noah as a good and decent man. However, the nature of Noah is the subject of debate among rabbis. It is said that he may not have been truly righteous, but rather the best of a bad situation in a very wicked time. It is also sometimes argued that the scriptural Noah was chosen due to his willingness to follow orders rather than his personal decency and kindness. Tubal-Cain, the primary antagonist of the film, is introduced in the Book of Genesis. He is not an invented figure of Aronofsky, but Noah and Tubal-Cain never cross paths in the Bible.
Death comes from the heaven! This rain is meant to wash us off the face of this world. But we are men. We decide if we live or die. We are men. And men united are invincible. Do you want to live?
Finally, the appearance of the rainbow at the end of the film may seem overwrought and dramatic to some, but it is biblically accurate. Genesis chapter 9, 15 and 16. I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth. Noah is a film steeped in ancient religious stories from various sources. It is not only a story about Noah's Ark specifically, but also about the nature of sin. Of this, Noah's co-writer, Ari Handel, had this to say, quote, "What we want the film to make you think about is the core question of Genesis, the nature of goodness and wickedness in men's heart, and whether that should be responded to with justice or mercy, the relationship between mankind and the world around him to be sacred. Those are the questions we grappled with." Unquote. Sin, in the Abrahamic sense of the word, is any act which violates the will of God. Everyday language has reinterpreted the word to mean anything that is bad, even in secular terms, but the word sin is meant to be intrinsically linked with God, not secular morality. Original sin refers to man's temptation in the Garden of Eden and disobedience in the eyes of God. Many Christians believe that man carries around this original sin, and that it is a condition that either characterizes mankind as having a slight deficiency, or even a tendency towards sin. In the film, it is depicted in the prologue, in a flashback story told by Noah, and referenced either visually or through dialogue anytime the snake skin is shown. In other words, although this is largely a tale of Noah and the flood, the importance of original sin is played up multiple times in the film. The New Testament refers to Adam and Eve's fall as having washed sin all over humanity. Romans chapter 5 verses 12 through 21. Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sinned. For sin indeed was in the world before the law was given, but sin is not counted where there is no law. Yet death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those whose sinning was not like the transgression of Adam, who was a type of the one who was to come. When watching the film with an understanding of original sin, a few visual clues about man's fall become clear. First, it is said that snakeskin from the Garden of Eden was preserved by the Creator, passed down by Adam and Eve to their children, and is eventually owned by Noah. At the end of the film, Noah wraps the snakeskin around his arm in a ceremony. The snakeskin is not only a keepsake from the Garden of Eden, but also a reminder of man's fall. Watch this scene. The snake sheds its skin, becomes darker, losing its light, losing its innocence. This is signifying its descent into evil, and possibly its corruption by the devil. Adam and Eve are portrayed as beings of light. After the removal from the garden, humans look as they do now, visually changed and without their glow. The snakeskin is not only a memento from the Garden of Eden, it is a symbol of purity, once lost, and perhaps in hopes of attaining it once again. The Watchers, too, were originally glowing with bright light. Once condemned by the Creator, they became misshapen rock creatures. However, around the halfway point of the film, the Watchers are summoned back to heaven, and with this, they become light once again. They have redeemed themselves in the eyes of the Creator, showed great self-sacrifice, and were called home to be saved from the flood. That means that mankind may be one day worthy of forgiveness, and that original sin, as shown in the film, may not be man's curse forever. The film takes a redemptive view of sin, not one of damnation or lack of forgiveness. The film also tackles the always uncomfortable subjects of misinterpreting God and killing in His name. In the second half of the film, Noah becomes convinced that the Creator wants all of humanity to be destroyed, despite giving Noah visions that helped save himself and his family. Because of this, Noah threatens to murder his 2 newborn grandchildren. Noah's misunderstanding of the Creator's will may paint him as a monster to some, but he genuinely believes this is necessary. This touches on the notion held by theistic religions that if God wills it, then it must be right.
These are my children! Your grandchildren!
I will not be stopped!
I know I cannot stop you from that crying! Please don't let them die crying! Let me calm them!
In another story in Genesis, commonly called the Binding of Isaac, God tells Abraham to sacrifice his son. Abraham attempts to do so, only to be stopped at the last moment by the angel of the Lord, who informs the father that Isaac would be spared. Abraham believed that if God told him to do it, then it must be right, no questions asked. It should be noted, however, that there are differing views on this. For example, God prophesied that Isaac would bear children. It's possible that Abraham's faith in God may have led him to think that Isaac would be resurrected to fulfill God's earlier vision of the future. Anyway, back to the film. Noah decides at the last moment not to murder his grandchildren. He says that his heart was filled with love, and that he could do them no harm. At first, he believes he has defied the Creator, but he is later told that his show of mercy was what was needed all along. Of God's seeming lack of compassion, the film actually presents a narrative for the Creator as well. Although never seen in the film, he is referenced over and over again, and his actions and attitudes can be ascertained if one looks closely. In the prologue of the film, the Creator condemns mankind and condemns the Watchers. In the middle, he sets up a plan, and at the end, he declares, through the rainbow, that he will never again have to wipe out mankind. Noah's journey of learning mercy mirrors that of the Creator.
This will be your work. And your responsibility. So I say to you, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth.
Free will, as a concept, is explored in Noah as well. Free will is agency, the ability to make choices unimpeded. The concept of free will has a complicated association with belief in God. If one believes in God and free will, it implies that individual will and choices can coexist with an omnipotent, omniscient divinity. Disbelief in free will is sometimes called determinism. Disbelief in free will due to an all-powerful God is called theological determinism. If God has a divine plan, as it is sometimes said, then our actions cannot be free. This is called predeterminism. If God does not have an exact plan but is still omniscient and therefore knows the future, then our actions are still already set in time. The film leaves this ambiguous whether it means to or not. The film eventually has Noah exercise his free will and decide against what he thought was the creator's plan. He is later confronted by the other survivors who believe he actually did what he was supposed to do, and that his belief that the creator wanted him to kill his grandchildren was false. That means that either the creator knew Noah would be merciful, being omniscient and seeing the future, and that is why he chose him, or the creator hoped and suspected Noah would be merciful, but not omniscient in the film, and acknowledged Noah's free will and agency. Noah's wife, Nema, does not solve this with her speech about what Noah was meant to do all along. In fact, those two options can really spawn several more when factoring in incompatibilism, metaphysics, and a host of other things. And frankly, this Bible epic is not going to solve free will. Not only because it's an endless, timeless debate, but also because the film does not show a hard stance, or even a soft stance. It broaches the subject, but does not explore it. And perhaps that is a failing. Moving on, the film seems to subscribe to evolutionary creationism, the idea that there is an intelligent designer of the universe and biologic evolution exists, the notion that these things are not mutually exclusive. In the long montage of development on Earth, it becomes clear that slow evolution spanning millions of years is suggested. This also puts Noah's view, and indeed the biblical view of the beginning of the universe lasting 6 days, and a rest on the 7th, into a less literal definition. Some biblical scholars believe that the incremental days of creation were not meant as 24-hour periods as we have come to understand them. Take this into account. Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 16. And God said, "Let there be lights made in the firmament of heaven, to divide the day and the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years, to shine in the firmament of heaven, and to give light upon the earth. And it was so done. And God made 2 great lights, a greater light to rule the day, and a lesser light to rule the night, and the stars." This means that the sun was not created until the 4th day. That has led to some scholars to speculate that the first 3 days were not days as we know them, and believing that the first 3 days lasted a very, very long time is not necessarily in contradiction with the book of Genesis. The film definitely sees it that way. In fact, there does appear to be some purposeful confusion in this adaptation about when exactly it takes place. In the film, it is said that Noah is only a handful of generations from Adam, but in the Bible, Noah is said to be centuries old before he even starts having children. So, when the film Noah takes place is called into question, especially since some of the figures in the montage sequence do appear to have modern-day weaponry and military uniforms. That means Noah could take place in the future. Aronofsky even confirms this possibility in an interview. Some early Jewish interpretations of the antediluvian world suggest that the earth had been destroyed and recreated many, many times before the story of Noah, and that the tale of Noah's Ark was simply the one that worked out for God. Interpreting so-called gaps in the Torah is called midrash. So the idea that the film adaptation of Noah takes place in an indeterminate time is not without scriptural precedent. The film's use of the flood to tell the audience about the doom of the world has led some to speculate that the film has an environmental message. The flood alone may be enough, but there are other bits and pieces scattered throughout the film that support this. Noah and his children are apparently vegetarians. He also tells children not to remove anything from the earth unless it is absolutely necessary. To summarize, the film uses ancient myth and religion to tell a story with an everlasting message about having only one world, and that we have to make difficult choices about how we go about living in it and preserving it. Hi everyone, if you enjoy my show, please consider clicking on the orange link at the bottom. My Patreon is how all of this happens. Click the circle to subscribe or the image to keep watching.